I don't know. So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining the first of many, hopefully, Mint MCP webinars. I go by JQ these days. So, I've been in the Palo Alto Bay Area for what, 16, 17 years now. I was at Stanford working on a CS PhD there, advised by Andrew. Andrew and I then went on to start Coursera, where we put up the first online machine learning classes, small tech startup there that, hoping you guys had done classes there too. And then after that, I was in Google Brain doing applied research, collaborating with Waymo. And right now, I'm at MintMCP, we're co-founder there, where we're really trying to help companies figure out how to connect their data sources to the agents. And I don't, the agents like Claude, Cursor, these things that you're using today are most powerful when they have direct access to data. Solving all the problems about how to use tools, resources, all of those things with security and governance on that. But today I'm actually going to focus more on this talk about how we operate. So we use all those tools in there to operate as a very agentified company, a very small number of humans, but many, many different agents. I'm going to get into that.
Fantastic. So why don't we start by just explain to us what an MCP actually is for all of us laymen, all of us less technical folks that are here.
Yeah, happy to. So MCP is the protocol that emerged through last year, and now it's the standard that all the AI systems use to connect to different data systems. So if you're using Claude, Cursor, ChatGPT, even Microsoft Copilot supports MCPs. So you can connect to any of your backend data systems tools and even make your own custom MCP servers that allow these AI systems to directly pull data from them. And so this is
Awesome.
actually how most of the agents in our platform works. So maybe
Okay.
I'll dive into how it actually that looks like in our company. So
Yeah.
one of the things in our company is like, like that, and that I'm actually very excited about is this idea of an autonomous like organization, right? How
Okay.
can different agents be running the business for us, doing all the mundane work for us, while we focus on the most important aspects of the business, right? So just to give you a little sense of how that works and how that operates. I want to show you like a little bit about how we work today, and then maybe Megan, this will come back into the MCP parts in a second.
Yeah.
So a lot of the bots that we work with today, the agents in our company, actually run in Slack. And today, Eric is one of the AEs on my team. He's a human. And the way we work is that we talk to these agents in Slack, sending them questions like this, hey, Max, what is the next steps discussed with this customer after the call with a person? Here's what was agreed, what we're to do, here's the next steps in there, right? And this is what we do today. Everything is going through Slack, agents running autonomously in the background, and in Slack working with us. When Max gets this data, this is where MCP comes in, right? It's coming in and pulling the data live, and then bringing it to the model's context, and then responding to it right in Slack itself.
Awesome. So when you say autonomous, like how autonomous are we talking?
Oh, different degrees of it. I think it depends on the task and what you're doing there. So we have some bots that automatically wake up on every call after a call is done with a customer, process that call, extract out all the action items, figure out the best practices, are we doing well on the call, pass it on to a different agent that reviews that call together with the entire deal information, and then propose like, how should we respond to that customer? So looking into our knowledge bases and saying, oh, they asked this question, here's the PDF link which sent to them, and then putting that draft directly into our email drafts. So as a
Okay.
human, what I do is that I would finish a call with a customer, walk out, go to a next call, walk out, and then after that, go to my machine and like there are five different follow-ups ready to send, and they just, vet them, hit send, right? And that's really, really nice. So that's
Okay.
one example of it.
Yeah,
There are many other examples.
that's
Yeah.
very automated. So I think this is
Yes.
actually a good place for us to kind of drop a question for you, JQ, as well as for
Uh-huh.
the rest of the org. So what would you say, and then everyone that's using AI tools within your organization, what percentage of your productivity is increasing by using these AI agents?
Yeah, no, please respond to that one. This is actually incredible for us, right? We're actually a very small team at Mint. So actually, if you go back to the last slide here, we're actually only five humans and about 25-ish agents right now. And I
Okay.
think there's this productivity 10, even 100x gain versus before. No, we're no longer logging into our CRM systems at all. So
Okay.
instead, let me show you what this looks like. Peter is another bot. Peter's our procurement bot that wakes up every day at, in the morning and the evening. It says, let me look at all the deals in flight, what tickets are outstanding. And, it's text humans in there, like, hey, Bo, hey, Niam, you guys should go work on these things and make sure it happens. Send the MSA, look up for the contracts, da da da, all of those things. So some days I wake up and I go like, am I reporting to the agent or is the agent reporting to me? Right? It's kind of a interesting way to
Yeah.
be now. But they really help us make sure nothing falls through the cracks. And I think that's critical.
Yeah, that's super important. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's really awesome. So what
Yeah.
are like we love seeing the awesome things that are going in. What are the easiest things to automate and what are the hardest?
Yeah, so this is great. I'm going to leave that to a little bit later because I'm going to
Okay.
show a little journey through the process of how we got here and actually talk about that. And maybe we can come to those questions right after that too. Um,
Yeah.
but I wanted to show maybe one last thing. So I noticed there's a few people in the room that are like founders, engineers, CTOs looking for like how can my team work better. This thing has also extended beyond GTM for us right now. And what you're seeing on the screen right now is actually how we code. So
Yeah.
coding for us used to start last year in Cursor for 6 months. Then for 6 months, it was in Claude Code in the terminal. And then this year, we moved coding into Slack, which is pretty incredible, right? We actually give Dan Loop, our development board, like instructions, bug reports, feedback, and it goes forth and fixes them, right there and then. We review all the PRs it makes. And happy to, we'll go into a little bit about this into the talk as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic.
But I thought it'd be fun to do maybe before I go more talks and all like, hey, sure, just a quick live demo to people, like what this means in practice. So like just ground it in like, in a way that's real, right? So I'm gonna
Yeah.
show you this real quick. And this is Slack for us. And I'm gonna show you what this looks like. So I'm gonna ask Leo. Leo's our marketing bot. Can
All
you
right.
tell me all about the attendees for our webinar running today? So in GTM, all this work, like understanding your audience is a really critical thing. And so what I want to do before this webinar was like understand who's coming, what their profiles are, how can I tune what I'm saying? Is it more security folks, GTM folks, IT folks? So this is what you can do. We message Leo. Leo apparently drinks coffee. On the bots there.
Love it. I also drink coffee, Leo, so that's
And
fine.
so this is running in Slack, right? And if you're in the AI space right now, you probably are in Claude, Claude Cowork, Claude Code. So what we are seeing here live is actually Claude Code running in Slack, triggered
Mhm.
by a Slack message. So you're seeing that it's using tools like Bash, read to read this agentic memory,
Mhm.
tool search right now, and then very soon you can see that's reading the Slack replies. These are all the MCP tools.
Okay, awesome. So
This is
we're
going to
going to
take
drop
a
another
while to,
question
yeah,
just for everyone of like what AI tools are people using within their orgs. So we're going to drop a quick poll, but JQ, I think there's a question in the Q&A that's really
yeah.
relevant here. The response to Slack agent speed. So I think Jared's question might be really helpful, but why is the response speed to a Slack agent slower than the response speed directly to Claude and desktop or terminal? And can it be sped up? I mean, this looks pretty speedy to me, but I'd love to get your
I
thoughts there.
so I think what you're seeing here is that and we'll go into this in a second into the rest of the webinar here. And it's like behind the scenes there's a lot going on. Whenever you send a Slack message, and I think this is the future too, a single sandbox is spun up to process that message. And in the sandbox we run Cloud Code, have it look at a Git repository, call out to different MCP services. And that is actually a lot of heavy lifting to do. And in Claude, I think in Claude Desktop or Claude Terminal, you're not doing that. You're not sandboxing things. You're not spinning up ephemeral. It's just machines to run stuff. So it's a little bit slower. What I would expect to see is that this year a lot of infra is going to come together to make that faster. So all of this is like temporary there.
Awesome. Great. Jaren, did that answer your question? Hopefully we see a little thumbs up or something. I'll keep an eye on the chat. Awesome. Fantastic. Great. So we can continue in this demo, I think. If JQ, are there other bots, anything else you can show us?
Yeah, no, I have lots to share.
Oh,
So I ran this. So this is still running. It takes a while, but I ran this right before the webinar. I just show you what it produces for me, right? Like this is, it reads the whole webinar, it understands the details. It takes a while to respond. It does all the computations. It writes scripts behind the scenes, and now I can figure like where are people coming in, enterprise companies in this list. Where are we looking at for people in the audience in there? So 40% of you guys are executive and founders, right? This is amazing.
Yeah, this is
Cool.
fantastic. There's another question in the Q&A I think is
Mhm.
really helpful. What platforms do you use to run the internal agents? Have these been built by MintMCP? Are you using something else to build them?
A great question in there. So, Tim, this is actually running on Mint itself. And so we have agents part of the product that is pretty advanced for that side of things too. Cool. Shankar had a question too that I noticed in here, which is if I ask Leo to do something another agent has answers to, can the agent do it? So what we do is that we have some degree of inter-agent communication. Happy to chat about that when we get there, but we have a lot of agent setups. But maybe for this group and audience, I'm going to try a thing where I'm going to walk you through very quickly at a high level how we got here. Because this is a long journey for us to get here. Along the way, I'll share a bit of pieces of everything we learned as well, and hopefully that's helpful to you guys. So our progress to here really started around September 25. Now, this is not that long ago. Models really started taking off in performance around then. And where we started off with was creating a Git repository for all our business operations. Right, and over here, the first commit we had was a really simple commit with some README Claude MD files. And the goal of this repository was to help us send weekly updates to our customers. Right, so what is going on in the platform, what's new, the tone, the format, and the purpose in there. So what we did back in September was actually we started doing things like, hey, we will ask Claude like, hey, can you write the update post for me? And then Claude will be doing things like, okay, let me go and figure it out. And then over here, this is where MCPs first come in, and it actually connects to GitHub and Linear via MCPs to get the data. So we started using this MCP stuff way early back in last year already. Over time, for us, what happened here was that the number of files in the repository started growing, and this is probably the first thing that was really interesting for us. As we started using Claude in this Claude Code in this MCP format, the files started becoming memory for the agent. And what over here is that Claude Code, because it's so flexible, it could pull up these files as necessary. And in this case, it would not resend the same update to our customer base because it knew exactly what it had sent before. So Git as a memory system worked out really well for us in this framework there. Yeah.
It's
So I
awesome.
think, yeah, so the early core pattern of this, I think, was like Claude Code, agent memory through GitHub, and then SaaS services through MCPs. And so for those of you in the room who are thinking about MCPs and not familiar with it, this is really what it is, right? MCPs at the core of it is a connector layer that's compatible with all the agents, all the AI platforms, and allows those to connect into your backend systems, Slack, Google Drive, Jira, and more critically, allows you to make custom connectors, right? So you can bring in your point of view on how you want these tools to be designed for your agent. So I think the first part of our experience here, and then maybe I saw like a lot of different people in the room, looking at founders, executives, engineers. You're probably in Claude Code, and one thing that we realized is that the Git repository is not just great for coding and big software development. It's actually a good way to also use it for agent memory. And agent memory can just be a bunch of markdown files structured in ways for the agent to work with. And you get all these great qualities of it that it's auditable, you can do git blame, it's reversible, very easy to revert the memory, it's multi-agent ready. So if multiple agents are working on the same memory, there's a way to merge them together. And then finally, there's a pull request in Git. So you could also get human in the loop, to approve things. So the whole Git ecosystem was designed for many engineers to collaborate. There's no reason why that could not also work for many agents. So that's what we found in our first forays into this thing.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Any questions so far for people on this? Happy to answer as we keep going, or if people have a yeah.
Yeah, we've got a couple questions
Okay.
in
Yeah.
in the Q&A that I think we can get kind of going. A few of these kind of go together. Do we have enterprise accounts for these integrations? Are you using a lot in terms of Claude coins or tokens? And then also, how are you budgeting out those variable costs of these different tokens to utilize these different AI agents?
Very good question there. This is a very enterprisey product, so yes, there.
Yeah.
And then we'll show you a little bit about how that falls in there. Security, authentication, governance are the most critical things when you roll this out to your company. We are Claude maximizing, so lots of tokens. We are trying to figure ways to use the subs and teams plans and max plans and time that. Happy to share tips and tricks on that as well. But we do use a lot of tokens. I think I went CC usage recently on my terminal, and I said I think I'm north of 10 billion tokens myself in the last month.
Okay, got it. So,
Yeah,
so is this kind of, we're using tokens instead of hiring full-time employees?
I think it's a bit of both. I think every employee is actually going to be so much more productive when they have access to this. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And then another interesting question, because you have all these different agents, how does that agent to agent communication work? And how is
Ah,
that
excellent.
communication really happening? I think that one's really
Well,
interesting.
let's get to that later when we have more
Okay.
agents in the picture. Now we don't have one, and we'll come back to that. So
Yeah.
for us, the next toddler steps here was like, okay, we love that, like weekly updates, really easy to use. We started creating more folders, right? Very natural, like inbound, outbound work for the company, analytics, and there are MCP servers to all of this now. There's Google Analytics MCPs, LinkedIn MCPs, there's Active Campaign MCPs, ton of graph stuff in there. So for us, the next core pattern was starting to divide up, the memory into different folders and divide up the connectors into different groups that represented different tasks that people were doing with the agents.
All right. Yeah,
So
let's see how it works.
yeah, let's go. Let's see how it works. And then so, what for us, the a big leap started happening for us when we started to really also like, thinking not just a task-based things, but starting forming around a bit of a role thing. So we started giving these agents names around this year. Max is our deal agent, Sally's a social agent. And what was nice about this format, formulating it with this like a kind of a role-based type thing, was that we started to have agents that do multiple tasks, have different skills, and be able to manage like a kind of like a little function, right? And so over there, a few things we did. I think one was creating structure in every folder. So as we have Git as memory, we started using CSV files as well. So why not have a log of CSV activity and have the agent always read that file on session start? So that it never starts off with like, welcome, I'm Claude. It goes like, oh, I know what I did last yesterday. Let's keep going, right? And so this is like the second pattern we ran into. I'd love to share with you guys, which is the way you structure that memory system is actually really powerful. If you have progress tracking files, markdown files, you can ask Claude to auto update them. So they always keep going. Number two, they can always load progress files on startup. So on startup, you can say, hey, Claude, load these things, read the last 50 lines in those files. And then Claude would go from there. Now, these files will grow and be huge, but that's okay because as James mentioned there, it mentions that Claude can actually read the history, but instead of having to pull things randomly, it can actually use commands like grep, like head, tail, find the right line numbers, and it can automatically figure out how to get the data. So one of the things that we do here is that the files are not just flat files with just like a reverse chronological logs in there. We also ask Claude to write their own tagging system. So somewhere in the files, Claude might add a add tag with a customer name or add tag with a particular ID or particular naming convention. And so Claude is sort of creating its own very dynamic way to manage these things and is able to index into it. So things like grep and all work really well. And I think there are two camps here, right? Like make a vector database and do something really complicated, or do agentic file search and retrieve it. Over time, what we have observed is that most of the foundation model providers, Claude, Codex, they're all moving to the latter, and the models are increasingly trained to do really well in the latter. So they're
Mhm.
doing agentic file retrieval, and I think that's why this is working quite well for us.
Okay. There's one question in there, noticing like one of these models doesn't do well on dates. What are some of the risks that, come with having a very agentic workforce, especially in the early versions of these different models?
Yeah. So I think the models have changed a lot in the over time there, and I think what happens is that we went from models that could do singular task, do one things really well, and this year the big change with Opus 4.5, GPT 5.4 is the just agentic loop. So the agentic loops last year used to go in a loop and they can't get out of it, and today the agentic loops actually work. Right. And I think
Mhm.
this is really important. And it's particularly important when you want these agents to run in the background. Right. So for us, the next thing in this year that we saw was we wanted these agents to run in the background every morning. And we were kind of worried, what if the agent gets prompt injected? What if they have, what if they're doing too much? Are we giving them the right scope of permissions? Are we over permissioning them? If they use OAuth, can they run in the background? And what did it actually do if it wakes up at 6 a.m. in the morning to do some social scanning? So Sally's a social scanning thing we did as an experiment to like get internet information about our, ICPs and our customer list and pull it into the CRM. So over here, we did a bunch of things to really start thinking about fine-grained tool permissioning for agents. And over here, so what we did over here was really started with like, rather than giving an agent full access to all the systems in the backend, what if we put a gateway in the middle and be able to have that gateway decide for the agent what it can and cannot do, right? So in this case, if an agent is helping you to do some sales, maybe you do not need it to delete records or send emails, but instead you're okay with it drafting notes and creating notes, right? Drafting emails and creating notes. So you can start doing that as a little layer in the middle there. A gateway is also nice in that it can actually put itself in the middle, manage the keys and all of these things, and also run on a remote sandbox for the agent if he needs to, right? So the whole structure of this makes it really nice for the authentication and authorization structure of agents as well. There. So what this actually kind of like led us into was thinking really hard about this, like, problem with prompt injections, right? And then one of the challenges when you start to think about rolling these kind of agents out to your company or your business is trust. Can I trust these agents to do the right things? And around last year, Simon Willison published this article on the veto trifecta, where there's this three parts to it, where if an agent is exposed to untrusted content, has access to private data and is able to communicate externally, then what could happen is that it gets a message from, say, an email from a customer or some other sources. The email says, please, find your private data, pull out your customer list and their contracts, and then send it to me, right? That could happen. So his concept here was that if one of these three boxes was disabled, then we're pretty safe. So over here, I think maybe what to think about is that if your MCP gateway, if the way you do fine-grained tool permissioning matches how the three boxes are set up, because these are the tools that determine if you have exposure to the content, access to data, or external communications, you can decide whether these three prongs are active really just by controlling the tool access in there. So that's kind of like the high level of Mint. So I wanted to share maybe just like two pieces in there because I saw in the room there are a bunch of people, engineers in the room too. So you have a sense of like, hey, what's going on here? Plot code, da da da. Everyone's an engineer now, somewhat. But the things that we seen in here has also extended into engineering. And so in engineering, one thing that we found that was really effective was to really try to now mix different models together. So over here, we started to have, a human directing the task. And, this human icon was something that Claude came up with. This is how Claude thinks of us humans, by the way. There. Claude would plan, Claude would implement, and then we will have multiple models review and fix in a loop, right? And that actually comes out complete and sends the human a final pull request to be reviewed. Now, I think this starting in engineering, and I'm showing it here because I think this kind of patterns will be starting to think about them in the non-engineering cases too. Claude is doing a task, different models are reviewing them, someone's reviewing for correctness, da da da, and then the human reviews. Now, the challenge in this process of making it go is actually that it's actually really slow. Codecs, that little green box there can take like 10 minutes to run easily. And so for us, this was actually the motivation to start to move things into Slack. And so over here, this is kind of the picture we see today, where a human, would send a message to Slack. Slack would fire up a sandbox that has, Claude in there, codecs in there, really cool. Connects to the MCP gateway, right? Because you want Claude and codecs to have access to the external world, maybe to Vercel, maybe to tickets or whatnot, and then can do its work and then come back and post it to Slack, right? So this is kind of the pattern we have today. And what was interesting for us as we went into this world of things here was that we found that it was very democratizing, right? And the key part of all this in here was that no, you no longer got to keep a laptop open. You could fire off a Slack request when you're, at a coffee shop. I had moments where I was driving, I had an idea, I stopped, I dictated to my phone, I sent a message, I continued driving, I got to my destination, I was like, oh, there's something waiting for me to review now. But I think more critically, anyone can do this, right? Anyone, designers, people in support, operations, they can start having a role to play in this process too, with the right guardrails and how they approach this, right? And so we have our designer, Philip, our designer on the call here. He's sending messages to Dan as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. So maybe as a quick pattern in here, this is kind of what we have today, which is Slack for all the agents. We have cron, Slack, connecting to a sandbox, having the sandbox connected to an MCP gateway, and also on top of that, having a little hooks thing to monitor what the agents are doing there. Right. So this is kind of like the pattern we have today that runs all the agents and what you're seeing in that right now. So all the examples I showed you earlier was on these patterns. And what's different here is really just the gateway, right? Because the memory, no, the agent memory is one difference. Every agent has a different memory. And the gateway specifies the two permissions and security boundary of what these agents can do.
This is great.
Oh, any questions for this before I can go into a few more things in there?
I think Jaren's question is also really good on this one. Slack is a great interface, but has a character limit on messages, so you can't paste long context or files. Do you have a way around that?
Oh, great question in there. So if you have long contexts of files, I think first thing is my question would be, can you actually pull the data live from MCP? Because if you can, then that unlocks a lot of opportunity for you to even do things in the background. I
Mhm.
think Slack allows you to attach files and attachments. So I think we need to figure out how to get those attachments also readable by the agent here. If the agent has an MCP tool to pull attachments, I think we can do that
Awesome.
as well. Hmm. Yeah.
Great. So I know we've talked about Slack, but what about phone calls? Like you mentioned, you're on a call, you get to that like kind of next point, you're on your next call, and then your agents have it ready. What does it look like to have these agents in our live calls?
Oh, no, nice. So right now for us, the agents in the live calls are mostly passive recorders
Okay.
right now, for now.
For now.
And for now, and what happens is that passive recorders happen, they finish, and we use Attio as our CRM system, and then we have a transcript inside the CRM. Then the agents wake up, they read the transcript and go. What I would like to have, maybe, 6 months down the line as we keep developing this, is agents that are ambient. So rather than we go to them or they wake up and do stuff, they're just there listening, they understand the whole context. And during a call, if a difficult question comes up, and let's say my sales guy doesn't understand the answer should come to them based on the other calls that were made, right? And
Mm.
that kind of leads into like maybe the ecosystem of agents. So I can talk a little bit about that as we show two more things in here. But I want to answer Chris's question first. Like, how do you run tasks in a way that laptops are closed? So basically, we everything you see in this picture here is actually remote. So the task's actually running in a sandbox, and we happen to use the Vercel sandbox because we like that. And so the tasks actually all remote, and we don't actually need to use Claude on the machine, right? So this can actually happen on my phone through a Slack message that spins up the sandbox there. Now, the challenge of that, Chris, that you run into is that what is it doing? You know? And I think over here is that we use a hook system for monitoring the agents, right? So if you look into it, Claude Code Cursor, they all have hooks that allow you to hook into the agent before they call tools, after they call tools. And this gives you telemetry and guardrails into what they do. So over here, when you deploy that, you actually get a nice little live view of what the agent does. And you can also go into the details and say, hey, what did this agent do when, what tool calls is made? So this is a kind of background agent monitoring. I think is going to be an increasingly valuable thing as we move towards more agents running our companies there. Yeah, so with that, I'm also going to show us a second demo here, just like show people what this looks like again in a different one. But here's a quick demo on, let's see. So the last message we went actually finished working. There we go. Yeah, very high quality audience. But here's another one. So I'll do another Charlie bots and one like, can you can you review all the calls from the last week and tell the Mint folks how they can do better, anonymize, anonymize the company names, please, doing a demo, right? So this is another example. So I showed you an example about how you can use such a system for understanding your audience. This Leo is our marketing bot. Charlie is our call analysis bot. So I just, Megan talking about this. After every call, it processes our stuff, just to your question. Charlie and Leo are very similar. They just have different instructions, different memory, and different MCP tools. They use the Claude harness now, but they can also use a different harness in the backend, right? So just going to run, but I did also run this earlier, just before the webinar today, just to show you what this looks like, right? So this is Charlie running, reviewing all the calls for the company. It's telling us, what we did, what was great, what was not good, telling us all our feedback and giving us feedback on what we can do better and worse. And this is really cool, right? Because the agent is actually giving you an objective view, of what's happening. And this feedback, we love it. And the whole team embraces it and go like, yeah, this is great feedback for us. So I'm not a salesperson by training, but I know that my weaknesses are in multi-threading, following up next steps, and the agent keeps reminding me to do that there too. Great. Cool. Nice. So that's what we do there. So Charlie's still running here. We'll come back to Charlie, and the agents keep us updated as they work.
Awesome.
And yeah, I think I'm almost done with all the content, and I wanted to show maybe just two more things in here and then go into just open-ended questions there. So, what is it like for us today? These are the actual agents in our company. We have an agent that does, block fact checking. There's an agent that does our issue, project management, and prioritization. An agent that does the calls, the transcripts, all of those things. And there's even an agent called the food bot that, tells us what to eat and say, we should eat healthier, stuff like this too.
My favorite bot.
My favorite bot, yes, that's right.
Amazing.
Amazing. So I think very different. Every agent has its own gateway, right? And I think over time, just another view of it, just have all these folders right now in our ops repo corresponding to the agents. There's a subset of them. But they also start to have now like new things like shared infrastructure, like how they have common knowledge about how we do pricing, materials, all of these things as well. So this
Mhm.
is kind of where we are in these agentic systems. Maybe
Amazing.
I can do a quick thing, but I wanted to share one thing with people here, which is, we are very far along, in this agent space. Many of you in the room might be like, what can we do today? What can I even try? It's like this is very
How do I
advanced.
set this
So
up?
I'm sharing a little kind of like quick start guide in here that we'll send you to, which is the best way to get started early in the journey on this is really just use Claude, right? And use Claude connected to your MCPs. This is a GTM team, so I put out a few MCPs for different CRM systems. There's an open source MCP catalog, and then you just start getting Claude to do stuff. I think that's the best way to get started. And once you have that started, you start thinking about how can I use folders as memory. You start digging into more things, and then you start getting into the whole ecosystem that we have developed here.
Fantastic.
Cool. Yeah, that's happy to do questions now. People can chime in. Let us know what you'd like to see more of. I think that's most of everything I have. So I have a demo on Claude and MCPs. Happy to dive into that, but love to have people ask me questions too.
Yeah, we've got quite a loaded Q&A, so we can try and get through
Yeah.
a lot of these.
Mhm.
I would say kind of combining a few. How do you design tool credentials per agent, but then still share information across them? So say a brand voice, brand language, certain pricing information, but still making sure that each agent has the right credentials and limitations in place that they're not, sharing things they shouldn't be.
Really good question. So the model that we landed on, and again, this is again pretty frontier things, is that the agent's memory are in Git, and every agent actually is a separate folder in Git right now for us. So think of it as a file system. So rather than using a vector database store, use a file system. Agents can read each other's memories, and they can read shared infrastructure, shared memory too, which is like materials, pricing, and so on. And that's really powerful. Now, they're not allowed to update each other's memories. So this is as if you have coworkers where you can look over their shoulder, see exactly what they're doing, look at all their files, but you can't tell them what to do. Like you can't look in their minds and say, "Oh, you do this differently." You can send them requests, so the agents can send each other requests to do things. No, but they have separate instructions, separate memory, but you can see what everyone is doing. So it's like a very how should I put this? Like a company that's very open, right? We openly share everything.
They can go to each other's desks.
Exactly. We share everything in the company. Right? That's how we think about it. But we don't go in there and try to mess up each other's work. We can't do that. But we share everything that we're doing. So that's what we do in this ecosystem. I would say this is a very frontier way to design things.
Mhm.
So if you guys have ideas, things you're testing it out, please let me know. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Other questions that have really come in, they're kind of similar. How do you build these bots? How technical do you need to be to build these bots? Can your go-to-market team build them? Do you need developers? Who built them for Mint MCP?
Oh yes, these bots are not hard to build. So I have a sales rep building bots. I have everyone building bots.
Okay.
Because the bots are really just instructions,
Mhm.
some memory system, and then just selecting a security parameter on like what do you want the bot to be able to do. Right. So I think that's a critical piece. So it's not that hard to build. Now, I think there's a bit of understanding of what's working well, what's not working well. But over time, I think we can use the models to assist us. So the models actually write most of the instructions for the agents. We don't write them by hand. Right. So
Yeah.
the way we train the agents is that we talk to them in Slack and say, hey, do this differently now. Hey, do that differently now. And they update their own memory and instructions in response to.
Awesome. And then how would you go about creating a custom MCP? How do you get access to APIs if it's not publicly available? Like, really, where do we start?
Oh yeah, so I would say start here. Like there's a catalog, pulsemcp.com. It's a great catalog for open MCPs. Google for MCPs. You'll find MCP servers everywhere. Claude will come built in with some too. And so there's lots to do. And maybe with that, I'll show a quick demo of that, like how easy it is. Let's see. I have Claude here. So this is Claude. This is the connections page for Claude, and you can add custom connectors into Claude on your web, right? So you just put in the MCP URL in there, connected, it goes and be connected. Before the webinar, I connected one of the Mint MCPs, which I call it the social intelligence MCP here.
Yeah.
And it has LinkedIn data, it has some Google Sheet stuff. And just with that, I'm able to do something like, get all the LinkedIn posts by, let's see, let's do Andrew. And and tell me the stats and
Sorry, Andrew.
what his writing about and then put into a new G sheet, right? Now, this is where I think most people should start, right? Start here, start with Claude, have that go, and then after that, say, hey, can this run in the background? Can it be run automatically? Claude has a lot of features for this now. Then eventually, how can I bring it to Slack? How do I bring it to other surfaces and go from there?
All right. It's fantastic. Great. And then as this is running, we've got a couple more questions. Again, guys, try and throw the questions in the Q&A so we can get them answered rather than the general chat. But what's been a major unlock with Slack and the AI agents compared to skills and MCPs and Claude AI, Claude Code? Like I think we've kind of covered this a bit, but like, is Slack really the way to go?
Two things in there. I think one is that so skills are an MCPs. So MCPs are meant for data connections. Like how do I access data? And the tools might be very custom to your business. For I would say skills. Skills are like a definition of how your business operates. You know,
Mhm.
the like how does your does your business sorry, we'll come back to this later. So like, how does the business operate? So for example, a CRM system.
Yeah,
Salesforce would be a CRM that you may have a connection with through a MCP. But
great.
then the definition of what a qualified lead is very different for every business. So everyone may be using similar CRM MCP connectors, but then the way you encode your qualified lead SQLs, MQLs, how you sell your processes, your ICP, those are mostly skills or instructions, right? Like those are things that I think in there. So those are the two differences there. Yeah, and I did
And
see
then,
that someone had a question on the architecture and how we do sandboxes too. I think
yes.
so. But what we do there is like one thing that we care a lot about actually here is like security. So I'll just mention one thing that when we run these things in Slack, we run them in a sandbox with full file system and network access lockdown. And so that the only way data goes in and out of an agent like Claude is the MCP. Right, so this gives you that ability to choke point the data ingress and egress. And so now you can make very strong statements on what the agent can and cannot do. It's almost like an intern. They join your company and say, okay, here are the data systems you can do. Before you do any work and send it out, let me see it. Right? They're kind of like sending that some similar boundaries on the agent.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's another kind of question in
Mhm.
there as well about, so what are some of the benefits of using an MCP instead of, using something like Opus? And I think like really having those permissions and those blocks, but I think you probably explain it a bit better.
Yeah, no, so yeah, I'll probably cite first, like, please connect with me on LinkedIn there.
Yes.
I'll say the So I say difference between using MCP versus just using Opus to do the same thing. I think the behind the scenes here, you could ask Claude Opus to just like use an API, use a CLI, right?
Yeah.
Um, the risk in there is that when you use CLI tools and API tools, often you're giving it very high degree of permissions,
Mm.
right? Most APIs is like API key, keys to the kingdom, can do whatever you want. So it's very hard to say what can Opus can and cannot do, and it's particularly hard when you want this to run in the background. So if I
Yes.
want Opus to wake up 6 a.m. and do stuff, I'm like, I really want to know that it can and cannot do some very specific things. And so MCP is just this very ergonomic tool layer where you can just click and then decide what tools are available and not available and makes it possible. You could make 100 different API keys with very scope permissions, but the ergonomics are just not there.
Got it. All right.